What a child wishes for in moments of terror may not serve the man he becomes. Sometimes the sanctuary we beg for in youth becomes the prison that destroys us in adulthood. Tonight's tale has us straining to see through the fog, but only finding a glimpse into madness. The fog rolled through the industrial district like smoke from a funeral pyre, thick and gray and suffocating. Lionel Cates pressed his back against the cold brick wall, listening to the sirens wail in the distance. His heart hammered against his ribs. His hands still trembled. 30 seconds, that's all it was supposed to take. In and out of the jewelry store, smash the cases, fill the bags, run to the car. But plans have a way of turning to ash when you least expect it, and now Tommy Brennan lay bleeding on the sidewalk 6 blocks away with a bullet in his chest. Lionel's bullet. He could still hear Tommy's voice, pleading through gritted teeth. "Don't leave me, Lionel. Please don't leave me." But Lionel had made his choice, quick and clinical. One shot to keep Tommy quiet forever. The man would have talked under interrogation, would have given up names, would have dragged them both down. It was mercy, Lionel told himself as he slipped through the shadows. A kindness. The abandoned building rose before him like a monument to forgotten ambitions. Half factory, half office tower, it had been gutted by bankruptcy and time. Perfect place to disappear for a few hours. Let the heat die down. Let the sirens fade. Lionel shouldered open the rusted door and stepped into darkness. The lobby stretched before him, filled with the detritus of collapse, broken tiles, twisted metal, the skeleton of what had once been an information desk. Moonlight filtered through shattered windows, casting everything in silver and shadow. He found a corner behind an overturned filing cabinet and slumped against the wall. 52 years old and still running. Still hiding, still taking what didn't belong to him. But he'd never hurt anyone before tonight. That had always been his rule, his code. Break into houses when the families were away, crack safes in empty offices, keep it clean, keep it simple. Never leave a victim who could look him in the eyes and remember until tonight. The silence settled around him like a shroud. No sirens now. No footsteps. Just the sound of his own breathing and the distant drip of water somewhere in the darkness. It's almost peaceful in here, he thought. No cops, no noise, no one looking. If I could stay hidden forever, he shook the thought away. Dangerous thinking. Weak thinking. He'd wait until morning, then slip out through the loading dock he'd spotted on his way in. Find a fence for the jewelry. Disappear into another city, another name, another life. That's when he saw the boy. Small figure seated cross-legged on the cracked lobby floor, maybe 9 or 10 years old. Pale skin. Mop of dark curls that caught the moonlight. Clothes dirty, but not ragged. And eyes that held a clarity that didn't belong on a child's face. The boy looked up at him and smiled. "Hello, Lionel." Lionel's hand moved instinctively toward the pistol tucked in his jacket, but something stopped him, the voice. Soft and familiar and impossibly calm. "How do you know my name?" The boy tilted his head, a gesture so familiar it made Lionel's chest tighten. "You told me I was your best friend. Did you forget?" The words hit Lionel like a physical blow. He stared at the pale face, the dark curls, the strange mix of warmth and judgment in those young eyes. It couldn't be. It was impossible. But the voice? "Benny?" The boy's smile widened. "You remember." Lionel's legs gave out. He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the cold floor, staring across the lobby at a ghost from his childhood. Benny had been his only friend during those dark years, his only comfort when his stepfather's rage turned violent, his only companion when his mother disappeared into bottles and men and excuses. Benny had lived in the silence between heartbeats, in the space under the bed where Lionel would hide, in the darkness of the closet where small boys went to disappear. "I wish I could vanish," 8-year-old Lionel had whispered into that darkness. "Then I'll go with you," Benny had always answered. But that was 44 years ago. Benny wasn't real, had never been real. Just the desperate invention of a lonely, frightened child. "You're not here," Lionel said, his voice barely above a whisper. Benny stood and walked closer, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. "I'm wherever you need me to be." He settled down beside Lionel, close enough that the man could smell something sweet and familiar. Burnt cinnamon. Like the kitchen on the morning his mother left for good. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Benny began to hum. a soft, lilting melody that made Lionel's throat close with unexpected emotion. His mother's lullaby, the one she'd sung before the drinking got bad, before the men started staying over, before she stopped looking at him like he mattered. "Why are you here?" Lionel asked. Benny stopped humming. "You called me." "I didn't call anyone. You did. In the alley. When you pulled the trigger." Benny's voice took on a harder edge, older, more knowing. "You wished you could disappear, just like before." Lionel closed his eyes. The memory was there, sharp as broken glass. Tommy bleeding on the pavement, the sirens getting closer. The moment of decision when mercy and murder became the same thing. And yes, in that heartbeat before he squeezed the trigger, he had wished. Desperately. Completely. "Let me vanish. Let me be invisible. Let me disappear." "But you never do," Benny said quietly. "You never disappear. You just run somewhere else and do it all again." Lionel opened his eyes. The boy was watching him with an expression that belonged on an adult's face. Disappointment mixed with something that might have been pity. "I survive," Lionel said. "That's what matters." Benny tilted his head again. "Is it?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Lionel didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Instead, he pulled out a flask from his jacket and took a long drink. The whiskey burned, but it was a good burn. A real burn. When he looked up, Benny was studying the walls around them. In the moonlight, Lionel could see crude chalk drawings scattered across the brick and concrete. A red wagon. A broken swing. A small figure huddled in a closet. "Did you do that?" Lionel asked. "They were always here," Benny said. "You just had to look." Lionel stared at the drawings. They told a story he'd tried to forget. A lonely boy who started stealing coins from his stepfather's wallet, not because he needed the money, but because he hoped someone would notice. Someone would care enough to stop him, but no one ever did. "I should go," Lionel said, struggling to his feet. "The cops," Benny interrupted him. "They're not coming." Something in Benny's tone made Lionel freeze. "What do you mean?" "Look outside." Lionel cautiously approached the front doors. He pushed them open and stepped into nothing. Fog stretched in every direction, thick and impenetrable. No streets, no buildings, no city at all. Just gray emptiness that seemed to swallow sound and light and hope. For a moment he was 8 years old again, lost in a department store, calling for his mother while strangers walked past without seeing him. The panic was immediate and total. He stumbled backward into the building, slamming the doors behind him. Benny was waiting. "You always get scared at that part," the boy said casually. "What's happening to me?" "You're right where you always said you wanted to be." Lionel's hands shook as he reached for his flask again. Empty. "This isn't real," he said. "None of this is real." He shook his head in disbelief. "Does it matter?" The question echoed in the silence. Lionel sank into a corner trying to make sense of what was happening. Hallucination. That had to be it. Stress and guilt and 40 years of bad choices finally catching up with him, but the cold floor felt real beneath him. And Benny felt more real than anything else in his life. "Tell me about the wagon," the boy said suddenly. Lionel's blood went cold. "What wagon?" Benny pointed to one of the chalk drawings. A small boy pulling a red wagon loaded with stolen treasures, coins and jewelry and small precious things that didn't belong to him. "You were 6, Benny said. "First time you took something that wasn't yours. A silver dollar from Mr. Patterson's desk. You put it in the wagon and pulled it around the backyard pretending it was pirate treasure." Lionel's voice cracked. "That was just playing." "Was it?" The memories came flooding back. The thrill of taking something forbidden, the secret joy of having something that was his alone. The way his heart raced when his stepfather asked about the missing dollar and he looked right into the man's eyes and lied. "I don't know where it went." And his stepfather had believed him, had patted his head and called him a good boy. That was the moment Lionel learned that lies could be armor, that theft could be power, that disappearing could be a choice. "You taught me that," Lionel whispered. "No," Benny said, and his voice was Lionel's own voice now, rough with age and bitter with experience. "You taught yourself. I just watched." Lionel tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw Tommy Brennan's face, heard the man's last words, felt the weight of the trigger beneath his finger. When he opened his eyes, his stolen goods were arranged in a circle on the floor, jewelry and watches glittering in the moonlight, surrounded by small handprints pressed into the dust. "Did you do this?" Lionel asked. Benny shrugged. You did it last time too, Lionel frowned. Last time? But Benny was already walking away, humming that same lullaby. The melody seemed to come from the walls themselves now, echoing through the empty building like a hymn. Lionel scrambled to his feet and followed, but the boy was gone, vanished into shadows that seemed deeper than shadows had any right to be. He found himself at the stairwell, staring down into darkness. His head pounded, and somewhere in the distance he could hear knocking. Soft at first, then louder, coming from inside the walls. Thump, 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 like small fists beating against the other side of reality. Lionel ran. He burst through the front doors again, and this time the fog had changed. Shapes moved within it, blue lights pulsing like heartbeats, just out of reach. He could hear the crackle of police radios, the crunch of boots on gravel. They were coming for him. He slammed the doors shut and threw his weight against them, barricading them with his body. But when he turned around, Benny was there, sitting calmly in the center of the lobby like he'd been waiting forever. This place only holds what you bring into it, the boy said. And you brought a lot. The knocking was getting louder now, not just from the walls, but from the ceiling, the floor, everywhere at once. Thump, 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 like the heartbeat of a dying man. Make it stop, Lionel begged. The sound was driving him mad. He couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The small fist seemed to be beating from inside his own skull now. He ran. Panic took over as he burst through the stairwell door, taking the rusted steps 2 at a time. Behind him, the knocking followed, echoing off concrete walls like gunshots. His foot caught on a piece of twisted rebar jutting from the crumbling steps. He fell hard. The jagged steel tore through his pants and bit deep into his thigh. Blood bloomed dark against the fabric as he tumbled down the remaining steps, finally coming to rest on the cold basement floor. Pain shot through his leg like lightning. When he tried to stand, his knee buckled. The wound was deep, deeper than he'd thought. Blood pooled beneath him on the concrete. He dragged himself into what looked like a sub-basement, leaving a dark trail behind him. The walls here were covered in children's drawings, dozens of them, flickering in the dim light filtering down from above. They all depicted the same figure. Him. Stealing. Lying. Help me, he gasped into the darkness. Please, I can't do this. Help me. Footsteps echoed on the stairs above, small footsteps coming slowly down. Benny appeared at the bottom of the stairwell, calm and quiet. His eyes searched Lionel's face, then lowered to the wound. You remember what you did, Benny said softly. When your partner twisted his ankle, you didn't help him. Lionel tried to protest, but Benny cut him off with a tilt of his head. That same old gesture Lionel made when he was disappointed. And now you want sympathy. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Lionel doubled over, gasping. His throat tightened. Up close, he could see that the boy's eyes were older than they should be. Sadder than they should be. They were his own eyes, staring back at him across a lifetime of bad choices. You didn't help him, Benny continued relentlessly. You stood there and watched him crawl, watched him beg, and then you silenced him forever. He would have talked, Benny replied calmly. Would he? The question hung in the air, and for the first time, Lionel really considered it. Tommy Brennan had been in the business for 20 years. He'd done time before. Had he ever ratted anyone out? No, never. And now you want comfort, Benny said, his voice taking on Lionel's own cynical tone. Now you want someone to tell you it's going to be all right. Lionel whispered, Please, I can't do this. I can't. Benny cut him off. You said that last time. The words stopped Lionel cold. What? And the time before that, and the time before that. Benny circled him slowly, speaking in that familiar voice, Lionel's voice, worn down by years of excuses. You always say you want to change, you always promise you'll be better, and yet, here we are. Memory fragments began surfacing like bubbles in dark water. This building, this conversation, this same desperate bargaining. How many times had he been here? How many times had he run from consequence only to find himself face to face with the boy he used to be? This isn't the first time, Lionel breathed. No, Benny replied grimly. How many? Does it matter? The truth settled over Lionel like a weight he couldn't lift. This place, it wasn't real. Not entirely. It was something else, something born from guilt and memory and the part of his soul he'd tried to bury so deep it could never find its way to the surface. But it had found its way. It always found its way. Because that's what conscience does. It waits, it watches, and eventually it calls you home. The knocking stopped. The silence was deafening. I want to stop, Lionel said, his voice breaking. I want to stop stealing. Stop running. Stop. Killing? Benny asked. The word hung between them like a blade. Yes. Benny knelt beside him. For a moment, he looked like the child Lionel remembered, innocent and trusting and full of impossible hope. Then stop. It seemed so simple, yet Lionel could only manage to say, I don't know how. You do. Benny reached out and touched Lionel's face with small, cold fingers. You've always known. You just have to want it more than you want to survive. Lionel closed his eyes. When he opened them again, Benny was gone. But his voice remained, echoing from somewhere deep inside the building's bones. You always said you wanted to disappear. Lionel stood on shaking legs and walked to the front doors. His hand trembled as he reached for the handle. And now you can. The door opened. Sunlight streamed in, warm and golden and real. He stepped outside into a world that seemed newly made. The fog had lifted. The industrial district stretched before him, ordinary and solid and exactly as it should be. He was free. He limped through empty streets as the city woke around him, past storefronts and bus stops and people beginning their morning routines. No one looked at him. No one seemed to notice the blood on his clothes or the haunted look in his eyes. He passed a bakery and caught the scent of burnt cinnamon. The smell made him stumble, but he kept walking. At a newsstand, he tried to buy a paper. The vendor looked right through him. Lionel waved his hand in front of the man's face, but there was no reaction. He tried again at a coffee shop. The barista took other customers' orders, but never acknowledged his presence. He could stand right next to people, could shout in their faces, could wave his arms like a madman. Nothing. The truth settled over him slowly like dust on a forgotten grave. He was free, all right. Free from consequence, free from pursuit, free from the weight of existence itself. He had wished to disappear, and his wish had been granted. Lionel walked through the city for hours, a ghost in broad daylight, a shadow with substance but no presence, alone in his perfect invisible prison, forever. Benny's words echoed in his mind. You always said you wanted to disappear, and now you have. There are fates worse than death, and sometimes they wear the mask of answered prayers. Lionel Cates got exactly what he wished for. Escape from consequence, freedom from pursuit, the ultimate disappearing act. But in a universe where moral debts must eventually be paid, some prisoners discover that their cells have no walls, only mirrors. Perhaps true punishment isn't being seen for what you've done, but never being seen at all.